Hey everyone, welcome to this live stream presented by Mother Jones. My name is Jamilah King. I am a reporter at Mother Jones and also a host of the Mother Jones podcast. And today I am in Oakland, California. Normally I am in New York, but quarantine, COVID has really shifted a lot of things. So I'm really excited to get into today's conversation. And what better time to talk about fighting for justice than now? We are in a moment where we are still mourning the death of Representative John Lewis, who was a civil rights icon. We are, fighting a devastating pandemic, and we are fighting for justice in the streets. And so I'm thrilled today to talk to someone who has devoted the better part of 30 years to public service, Congresswoman Barbara Lee.
And Jamilah, how are you? Really happy to be with you today.
I am.
You're in my home, and I'm almost close to your home. I'm stuck in Washington, D.C., trying to help with this next bill, waiting for that to happen.
Well, you are looking vibrant and thriving. I can't help but notice that beautiful purple wall behind you. You bring the color to D.C., so.
Oh yes. You know, as a person of African descent, I have to have color in my life everywhere.
So I want to start with remembering your colleague and good friend, Representative John Lewis. Is there a memory that you like to share about him that you think really encapsulates who he was? I know you all took a trip to Ghana to commemorate the 2019 right of return for Black folks.
Yeah, Jamilah, I tell you, first of all, I miss John. It's still surreal. It's hard to imagine John's not with us. And we were close friends and colleagues. And just a little bit of context in the history. Every year for 17 years, I've traveled with him to Selma, Montgomery, and Birmingham, and crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge with him, with my grandchildren, and then with young people from my district, from the Martin Luther King Freedom Center. And John always took time to meet with them, to talk with them, to mentor them, pull them in front of the line. And just this year, actually, with his health failing, he came to that march and that pilgrimage. And I had never expected him to take the kids aside or take them in and meet with them, but he wanted to do that, and he did. And so John was a loving person. He loved young people, but he had this strength, and as kind and gentle as he was, when you were around him and with him, you felt this power and this strength coming from him. We were in Ghana, led by Speaker Pelosi and Chair Karen Bass of the Black Caucus, to observe the 400th year of the first enslaved Africans being brought to the shores of America. And that was the first time John had been to Ghana. And let me tell you, he was given a hero's welcome. He was treated like royalty. I remember in the parliament, the speaker, Pelosi, first speaker to speak at the Ghanaian parliament. Well, John was there. John got this standing ovation. You would not believe, just on and on and on. Everywhere we went in Cape Town and Elmina, people knew him. Young people knew John Lewis. And there were just lines of people trying to talk to him and take pictures with him. So he's a world leader because people knew his fight for human and civil rights in America, but also for justice and for ending apartheid in South Africa and for peace and for nonviolence. So he's someone who I deeply miss. And one of the fondest memories I have of John was when 45 was about to be inaugurated. John and I were talking, and of course I'm going through this. I really don't want to go to that inauguration. John said, "You don't go, I don't go." I said, "I don't go, you don't go." And so we both did not go and participate in that inauguration of the 45th occupant of the White House. But also John, show you how bold and speaking truth to power he was. He even took it further. He said to the reporters, when asked, he said, is Donald Trump a racist? John said, yes, he's a racist. And he said, and he's an illegitimate president. And fast forward to today, we all know John was right, but John spoke that way back in the day, a few years ago, I tend to say what's on my mind and try to speak truth also. And I said, okay, John, I know this means a lot for you to say this. You're giving us a lot of courage to call this man in the White House white supremacist, leading with a white supremacist agenda. And he gave me what I needed to move forward with that message, because that's the truth.
So speaking of the 45th occupant of the White House, as you so eloquently called this person, what's the tone like in Washington, D.C. right now? And more importantly, we're talking about John Lewis, who is this leader and exemplifies what leadership is. How do you think leadership is not being exemplified in the White House right now?
In the White House, or
Yes.
with the Republicans in the House and the Senate? The Republicans are not exemplifying any leadership. And in fact, they're really, in many ways, because of the lack of leadership by 45, people are dying. And so we've got to put this in context of what is taking place in this country as it relates to African Americans, Black and brown people, but also the whole country. And because of him and his lackadaisical, immoral attitude about COVID-19, people are getting sicker and they're dying, and they're not, and this country is so far ahead of other countries in terms of infection rates and numbers. And so, you know, it's abominable. It's a shame and disgrace what's taking place here now. And so I take this moment to encourage everybody to please vote in November, because this election, we say, is the most important of our lifetime. But let me tell you, this election is about life and death. And these Republicans right now, and they're still dancing to Donald Trump's tune in the House and in the Senate. And so they are complicit with this agenda of Donald Trump's. And we're here trying to make sure that we at least get another bill passed to help people who are living on the edge and who have lost their $600 in unemployment compensation and who are about to be evicted and foreclosed upon. So just know this is a heavy lift, but we're doing this, and we are not going to abandon, the Democrats are not going to abandon the American people.
So you mentioned, obviously, our fight against COVID, which is having a disparate impact on Black and brown communities across the country. What's the role, you think, of the federal government in fighting this pandemic, when it's been clear from reporting from the New York Times, Mother Jones, and others that, you know, the White House has really tried to just give away the responsibility on this one? So what's the role of the federal government, do you think?
Sure. And in a pandemic, the federal government should step up and lead. We should have a national strategy so there's not this much confusion in the states, which it's totally chaotic in this country. Secondly, and I serve on the Appropriations Committee, and we insisted that CDC gather data based on race, ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic status, because we know which communities are being impacted. But if you don't have the data to document it, we don't have the targeting for the hotspots, for the resources that we're appropriating. But they still haven't done that yet. And so the role of the federal government is to fund this response, the pandemic response, for contact tracing, for testing, and for treatment and care, and step up and lead and make sure that people feel secure about their health and about their economic security. And this administration is making people more anxious and more nervous and more confused and sicker in many respects, because they're missing in action.
How close are you to a deal in Washington right now?
Well, there's I would say a glimmer of hope, but on the big deals, the big provisions that we're holding firm on, one is state and local government. They don't want to. We put now, mind you, we passed a bill 2.5 months ago because we anticipated this moment. Mitch McConnell didn't even start talking about a new bill until last week. So state and local government, we have to have at least $1 trillion, because these are essential workers. These are people who will be laid off and who will lose their jobs. And these are services that will be cut if we don't fund state and local government. So that's one piece that's on the table that we're negotiating, but they still don't seem to understand why. I think they've said 200 million. I mean, come on, my district needs 200 million. So, and then the other thing is the issue as it relates to the $600. their whole mantra is that these people could be, they're lazy. They're trying to make it appear they don't want to work, that they are making more money staying home. You know, that whole really horrible picture they're trying to paint. First thing is people need the $600 just to survive. They've lost their jobs, many, and probably don't have a job to go back to. They need to be able to take care of their families. And also wages are stagnant in so many communities. I mean, come on, $600 a week. Thank God we were able to do that. We should do more because, you know, minimum wage workers, we haven't even gotten to a living wage in this country yet. And so don't tell me these people are making more money on unemployment compensation rather than work. They want to work. And so we want to make sure that they have the unemployment compensation because people are living on the edge. Next, we have the moratorium on evictions and foreclosures in the HEROES Act. We'll get something on that, not sure what, but that's a bone of contention for them. And also the $1,200 in terms of cash rebate, cash assistance. But personally for myself, I think we should have at least $2,000 a month until the end of this pandemic. $1,200 is minimal, just one payment. I mean, that's not right. And so there are a lot of issues to negotiate, including the whole liability issue. I mean, they want to allow institutions, nursing homes, schools, they want to make sure that there's limited liability. And so that residents and clients and people who want to file or need to file a lawsuit because those health protocols weren't put in place and people got sick and died, they don't want the public to be able to sue. And that, again, is outrageous. So that's another issue that's on the table. So there are a lot of, that's why I say they're talking. So that's the glimmer of hope, but no way are we close. But I'm still here. Many members are still here. We're working remotely by proxy here in DC in our district. So just know that even though you may not see us on the floor, we're working very hard to try to make sure that people have what they need to survive this pandemic.
A while ago, you mentioned the needs of your district. I want to pivot to the other big story of the summer, which has been George Floyd and the fight against police violence. About 12 years ago, a young man in your district, 22-year-old named Oscar Grant, was shot and killed by a transit police officer. And you've spoken out in the years since on what needs to change in order to stop that type of violence. Can you talk about some of the recent work you've done around trying to bring not just accountability, but justice to those issues?
Thanks, Jamilah. And, you know, first of all, I have to give a shout out to the Black Panther Party. I was a community worker with the Black Panther Party. And way back in the day, the Black Panther Party stood down the police and said, we're going to protect our community from police misconduct, brutality, and murders. So this didn't just start for myself and for so many of us who have been fighting for justice and criminal justice reform and justice in the criminal justice system forever. And so the brutal murders of Oscar Grant, of Breonna Taylor, all of the Black and brown people who've been killed, this just didn't start. This has been going on. You had lynching, you had the historical context of systemic racism, which has led to all of what we see. And so the brutal murder of Mr. Floyd was just a manifestation of another form of systemic racism. And so we introduced the George Floyd Police Justice and Policing Act. And we put it together, that bill, which I have to tell you, it's a great first start. It's modest. It's a good bill, though. It incorporates bills from the 90s that John Conyers and Ron Dellums and members of the Black Caucus have been trying to pass forever, like banning chokeholds. I mean, come on, you know, that, or qualified immunity. No one is above the law, not even police officers. So we were able to get major provisions that have been around for years, decades, into that bill. So now where are we? With the Senate. Mitch McConnell, please. Tim Scott introduced a bill which was window dressing. You know, it has some nice language in, tried to kind of sound like the bill the House put forth, but that bill is in no way going to pass. It shouldn't pass because it has no teeth. things would be the same. So at least we need to come and start trying to negotiate with the Republicans on that. But Mitch McConnell, again, the elections have consequences. He's there just stopping every effort to move forward on the issues of racial justice and equity. And it's a shame and disgrace. Once again, I got to go back to voting. Please, please, please vote in November in John Lewis's honor and memory.
And, you mentioned the work that you're doing around First Step Back. Can you also talk about the commission that you proposed around truth? And it's almost like truth and reconciliation is kind of how I look at it. What's the sort of background of that specific bill and where did it come, or that specific effort and where did it come from?
Yeah, thanks, Jamilah. And I've been working on this for years now. Let me just, a little bit of historical context. Over 40 countries have put forth truth and reconciliation commissions after crimes against humanity, major genocides like in Rwanda, the brutal treatment of minorities. I mean, this is something standard that governments do after they have perpetrated crimes on minority populations. The United States has never done this as it relates to institutional slavery, ever. And so I decided years ago with my activists and academics that it was time for America to have a truth, racial healing, and transformation. We're not saying reconciliation because there's really nothing to reconcile as it relates to the history of slavery and bringing enslaved people 401 years ago here to America from Africa. So it's transformation. So the context is, like many countries, you document this historical record. You have descendants come forward to talk about the generational impact of racism, Jim Crow, lynchings, segregation. Those chains still haven't been broken. So you have to build the case. And America's never built the case, in piecemeal maybe. Some local communities have really done wonderful work around truth and racial healing efforts. But we have never had a national effort. And I'm telling you, the only way we're going to get past this is doing this. Then you try to bring people together around the healing process, because a lot of folks don't even understand why you see the disproportionate rates of African Americans and Black and brown people dying from COVID-19. They don't understand. And when I've had constituents, my progressive constituents call me and say, why do we see all these Black and brown people dying from COVID-19? What's going on? I said, don't you all understand that the healthcare system is discriminatory, is racist, and the impact has been Black and brown people dying shorter lifespans because of these underlying conditions, because they don't have access to the healthcare that they need. And also sometimes when we show up, we're turned away. There's racism in the system, but they don't make that connection between systemic racism. We're just now bringing forward what that really is, and the Middle Passage and the years of slavery. They don't understand the connection between lynching and the murder of George Floyd. They don't understand the connection of the Black codes. People don't even know what the Black codes were, and not being able to buy a house or being the target of subprime lenders. They don't understand, and I don't blame, and this is not about personal blaming. This is about attacking a system of government, bringing forth how this system of laws have been perpetrated through the generations that have led to systemic racism that leads to the quality of life that is so poor for so many people in this country. And so then we move to the transformational phase, which of course is HR 40, and that's reparations. You've got to repair the damage. The wealth gap is just too great. You've got to do something. And so this is the moment it's a moment of truth, and it's a day of reckoning that this country must have.
So you mentioned history and the importance of historical context specifically. I want to go back to 1972. We were in the midst of a bunch of social movements that were happening. We have a Republican president who is trying to get reelected, and there's a Black woman who steps into the fray named Shirley Chisholm to run for president. Can you tell me a little bit of, you worked on this campaign, that's what brought you into politics. Can you tell me any parallels or lessons you've really thought about in 2020 that date back to 1972?
Hey, let me tell you, first of all, Shirley Chisholm, she was my hero, shiro, icon, and still is. I don't know how well, I should know because I was here watching her when I was working for Rod. She navigated this hill, Capitol Hill, as the only Black woman in Congress. There are about 22 of us now, which is still a heavy lift, mind you, more coming. But she did it on her own by herself. So I got involved in her campaign. I was a student at Mills College, and I had a course in government, Black Student Union president, on welfare, raising two little kids, and working as a community worker with the Black Panther Party. So I was not apathetic. I knew exactly what was going on and was very active. So I had a class in government, was required to do field work. And then it was Governor Muskie Humphrey. And I said, no, Dr. Mullins flunked me. I've never flunked a class, but I refuse to work in any of these guys' campaigns because they don't speak to my community and to the issues and boo, boo, boo. So I was ready to flunk. But at the same time, as Black Student Union president, I invited the first Black woman elected to Congress to come to our Speakers Bureau. Lo and behold, it was Shirley Chisholm. She came, she spoke, and she said she was running for president. I said, what? And I went up and talked to her about my course, how I was going to flunk it, and she took me to task. And she said, well, first of all, you need to register to vote, and don't ever let me hear you say you don't believe in Democrats, Republicans, two-party system. I said, well, I don't because it hasn't done anything for Black people. So she insisted I register to vote and work in her campaign. So I ended up, bottom line, organizing her Northern California primary with Sandre Swanson, Sandy Gaines, and myself and Wilson Riles Jr. out of my class at Mills College. I got an A at the class, went on to Miami as a Shirley Chisholm delegate, and the rest is history, and registered to vote, of course. And so what I saw, though, during that campaign was very similar to what I see now in terms of how the media and how white men especially go after Black women. Then it was the same thing with Shirley. Now and sometimes she would just break down privately because people treated her, they'd call her crazy. They said her time wasn't now. Why would she want to do this? She won't wait her turn. She's too loud. I mean, they came down so hard on Shirley Chisholm, it was pathetic. I hear this woman spoke fluent Spanish. And when I listened to her at Mills College, that's why I had to go up and tell her about my class. Spoke fluent Spanish, talked about poverty elimination. She was against the Vietnam War. She was pro-choice. She was one of the first board members of NARAL. And this woman was like brilliant. And so all of the things that you hear now, in many ways, and I supported Kamala Harris when she ran for president, and I was disgusted with some of the comments and it wasn't even an undercurrent. It was some of the above board stuff people were saying about her and her candidacy. It was the same kind of dialogue and vitriol that I heard with Shirley Chisholm. And I traveled quite a bit with her, and I was with her a lot, and I worked with her, even though I was a staffer to Ron Dellums. Shirley really took me under her wings, and I was mentored by her also. And let me tell you, it's time now. Enough is enough. We're here to stay, and that's what I say to these guys. We're here to stay. So just shut up,
So you mentioned Senator Kamala Harris. She is being shortlisted as a potential pick for Joe Biden's presidential ticket as vice president. He's vowed to pick a woman. Two Black women, Kamala Harris and Karen Bass, are sort of in the leading edges of that. Why is it important that a Black woman have that position?
Well, it's so important, first of all, because we could do a better job than anybody right now in this country, because look at who we are, and look at how we have had to help transform this country this far, and look at our history. Look at our role in the Democratic Party, how we have gotten so many people elected, and look at what we've done and not having had a seat at the table. So we insist on a seat at the table. We should be president. Kamala should be president. And so we are insisting that this time, because Black women have been the backbone of the Democratic Party, but also we're smart. We know how to lead. We know how to lead not only the African-American community, but communities of color in this country. We know how to help regain the soul of America. And we have our unique history in this country to be able to lead out of the White House as president and vice president. As Dr. Maya Angelou said, yeah, and still we rise. And so we want to contribute to this country at the highest level because we know we're the ones who can do that and go through this and make this transformation real.
So, Congresswoman, have you been vetted for that position at all? And if so,
no, the California Democratic Party put my name forward along with Karen, but no, I have not been vetted.
Do you have any insight into the process, though, of what that's like?
Oh, I know what vetting is like, and let me tell you, you know, sometimes they dig so deep and put 2 and 2 together that does not make 4. and so you have to be ready for that also.
Wow.
Yeah, it's deep. I mean, it's I don't want to say the deep state, but they go really deep. And in fact, they and it's best that you know what to expect. And so it's best that you get prepared during this vetting process because there's nothing they're not going to dig up. And it's not going to be the positive stuff. They want to see how, and they float trial balloons to see how people are going to react to some of the stuff they don't, I won't even say negative, some of the issues they may consider negative to see what the fallout would or could be. And so it's a process that, you know, we have to go through. But, you know, Black women can go through that just like anybody else. And that's who we are. And still we do rise.
Right. So amid all of these challenges we've talked about, what's your message to voters about November and why it's important to get out there and vote?
Hey, first, let me just mention the census. Participate in the census, do the census. This 45th man over in the White House has now rolled back the deadline to the end of September where we had it end of October. So please fill out the census because not only does that determine your voice and the political lines that would be drawn for elected officials in congressional races, it determines how much money your community is going to get for housing, for infrastructure, for jobs, for education. And we cannot afford to lose billions of dollars by not filling out the census. So do that first. Next, we've got to vote in November. And we've got to vote because right now, this is a matter of life and death. I mean, we have 160,000 people who have died from COVID and who did not have to die if we had leadership at the top in the White House. And so just see this as a matter of life and death and vote. Vote for your children, vote for yourself, vote for your grandparents, vote for your parents, vote for an administration that understands systemic racism. And I was on the drafting committee of the platform for the Democratic Party. And it was a great platform. We wrote this platform with the input from Bernie and Biden. And this is a very progressive platform. We didn't get 100%, but I think we got about 85%. The racial justice section, we talked about race neutral policies don't work. We have a great section on women's health, repealing the Hyde Amendment, which discriminates against low-income women and women of color, get rid of the Helms Amendment. We support HR 40, the reparations bill. We support my truth bill, HR 100. So there are many provisions on climate change, on economic justice. We have a huge section on our brothers and sisters in the Native American community. And so and no one ever reads the platform, granted, but it's a document that you should hold your elected officials accountable to. And it's a great document, so please read it and use it when you need to use it, because this is the document that we said Mr. Biden, President Biden has to live by.
Right. Do the homework, folks.
Do the homework.
Well, Congresswoman Lee, thank you so much for joining us. I wish we could keep talking, but you know what? You got to get back to work and I'm going to let you. So thank you so much for joining this live
Well, thank you, Jamilah. I'm so glad to see you, meet you, and I'm so glad you're in my hometown of Oakland. So let me say to all my constituents how much I love you. Thank you for your support. Please stay healthy. Please, physical distancing. Please, masks. Please wash your hands. Use hand sanitizer. Please do everything necessary so we can get out of this. Don't think it's over. Don't get lax. Stay woke, stay focused, stay vigilant.
And to our viewers, thank you for tuning in. We really appreciate it. And as a reader-driven organization, it's events like these that really keep our work going. So if you want to support Mother Jones, it's very easy. Just go to motherjones.com/give. I'm Jamilah King. I will see you soon. Thanks for joining us.
See you, Jamilah. Nice.
Bye.
Thank you.